My name is Thea Afton, and I'm 31 years old. On my second day of being a mother, I stood on the sidewalk outside my in-laws' stone gate, holding my day-old daughter, next to two suitcases somebody else had packed for me. And behind that oak front door, my mother-in-law had just informed me there was no room in that house for a useless wife. My husband watched from an upstairs window. He didn't open it. I want to tell you I did something dramatic. I didn't. I stood there in the June heat with a newborn against my chest, doing what I do for a living, which is math. And then a gray sedan pulled up to the curb, and my mother stepped out of it with a lawyer and a folder. And what was inside that folder hit my in-laws' famous family like weather. Nobody saw it coming. Least of all me. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women keep the receipts, and the endings get earned, not gifted. If stories about family, betrayal, and boundaries are your kind of stories, you're home. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe. Now, let me back all the way up. I grew up in half of a duplex on Garnett Street with my mother, June Afton, who spent 30 years as an escrow officer at the title company downtown. My father left when I was 3. What I remember of him is a jean jacket and the smell of spearmint gum, and honestly, the jacket might be from a photograph. My mother never talked him down and never chased him, which tells you most of what you need to know about June. She is not a warm blanket kind of mother. She is a snow tires in October kind of mother. Practical love, scheduled maintenance, zero speeches. Her entire professional life was reading documents other people were too excited to read. Young couples buying first houses, farmers refinancing, big families quietly mortgaging their summer places. And her one commandment, repeated through my whole childhood like a pledge of allegiance, was, read it before you sign it, and if they won't let you read it, that's your answer. We were never poor, exactly. We were careful. Coupons, consignment, one vacation a year to a lake 2 hours away, and I want to be fair to my younger self about what that carefulness did to me. It made me hungry. Not for money, for the other thing, the thing I saw through lit windows on the walk home from school. Whole families, grandparents at the table, a dad carving something, a name everybody at church already knew, a house you belonged to instead of half a house you rented. My mother built us solid ground, and I spent my childhood looking over the fence at castles. It took me 31 years, 2 suitcases, and one gray sedan to finally understand which one of those things holds up in a storm. Every town like Cedar Glen has a family like the Vosses, the stone gateposts on Beaumont Avenue, the name on the furniture store downtown, on a brass plaque at the library, on the founder's wall at the country club. Voss. 3 generations photographed in front of the same fireplace every Christmas for the local paper. The kind of photo where even the golden retriever looks like it inherited something. Patricia Voss chaired the Heritage Committee. Harold Voss waved from a convertible in the 4th of July parade. When people in Cedar Glen said that name, their voices did a little bow in the middle of the sentence. I was 12 when I asked my mother, over meatloaf in our half of the duplex, why our family couldn't be like the Vosses. My mother didn't look up from her plate. "We don't buy names, honey," she said. "We buy ground." I rolled my eyes the way 12-year-olds are legally required to do, but here's the part I didn't have the eyes to see back then. She said it without any envy in her voice. None. And there was something else in there instead. Something dry and knowing. The tone she used at work when a customer bragged about a deal she'd already read the papers on. It was the voice of a woman who had spent 30 years at the escrow desk of a small town, watching every big name's documents cross her counter, one signature at a time. My mother knew things about the castles of Cedar Glen the way a plumber knows things about beautiful houses. I never thought to ask what. For about 19 more years, I wouldn't. And by the time I did ask, I was standing on a sidewalk holding everything I owned. I met Grant Voss because of a spreadsheet. I do books for small businesses. I have since I was 23, self-employed, my name on the door of a one-room office, Afton Bookkeeping. Voss Home Furnishings hired me to untangle their inventory accounts, and the manager assigned to work with me was the owner's son, 30 years old, sleeves rolled, self-deprecating in a way nobody with that last name had any right to be. Grant was, and I want to be fair here, because it matters later, genuinely likable. He remembered how I took my coffee by the second morning. He did impressions of the sales staff that were kind at the center. When the numbers embarrassed the store, he didn't blame the previous bookkeeper. He laughed and said, "We're a 100-year-old family business, Thea. We've had 100 years to develop bad habits." I liked him in a way that snuck up on me, the way a slow leak becomes a flooded basement. 8 months later, he brought me to Beaumont Avenue to meet his parents. Patricia Voss received me in a living room that smelled like lemon oil and old money, and she looked at me the way an appraiser looks at a chair somebody claims is an antique. The slow scan, joint by joint, checking for glue. Her first question was not what I did or how we met. She tilted her head, smiled with the front of her face, and said, "Afton. Now, whose people are the Aftons?" I said my mother worked at the title company and my people were mostly my mother. Something flickered behind Patricia's eyes and filed itself away. I thought it was disappointment. It took me 5 years to learn it might have been arithmetic. We got married the spring I turned 28, at the club, under a tent Patricia selected. Beside flowers Patricia approved, in front of 200 guests, of whom I could name maybe 40. I had wanted something small at the lake. I lost that negotiation so early I'm not sure it ever officially opened. "The town expects certain things from this family," Patricia told me, patting my hand like a gavel. "The one fight I won quietly at the county clerk's office. I kept my name. Thea Afton." When Patricia found out, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Voss brides take the name," she said. "It's an honor other women have been grateful for." My mother, who was standing nearby in her one good dress, said nothing, but her eyebrow performed a complete sentence. Grant did what I would spend the next 5 years watching him do. He stepped into the middle with his hands up, charming, apologetic in both directions at once. "Mom, it's her name. Thea. Mom means well." A sentence for each of us. Nobody defended. Everybody was managed. I filed it under wedding stress. And one more thing happened that weekend that I filed and forgot. At the reception, I overheard the club's events manager murmuring to Harold by the bar. Something about the balance, about the card, about maybe the other account, Mr. Voss. Harold's parade wave faltered for exactly 1 second before he laughed and clapped the man's shoulder like they were old teammates. "Rich people's paperwork," I told myself, "the plumbing of castles." My mother, across the room, was watching the same conversation over the rim of her glass, and she was not surprised at all. The plan was to live at Beaumont Avenue for a year, maybe 2. Save up, then buy our own place. "The East Wing has its own bath," Grant said. "It's practically an apartment." You can hear the sentence I should have questioned. Practically. We moved in with my office plants and his record collection, and for 2 weeks it was a soft landing. Big kitchen, garden, Sunday dinners with cloth napkins. Then, on a Tuesday, Patricia knocked on our door holding a leather book, and I got introduced to the household ledger. "Every couple under this roof contributes," she explained, warmly, the way you'd explain gravity. Our share came to $800 a month. Toward the household, do the first. Recorded in her ledger with everyone's initials in a column like a rooming house from 1910. And then, almost as an afterthought, the second ask, delivered as a compliment. "Grant tells me you're a wizard with books. The family's accounts are a shambles, dear. It would mean so much. Meaning, I would also be doing the Voss family bookkeeping. For free. I want to be honest about what I felt. Because this is the part of the story where I stop being able to blame anyone but the ledger inside me. I felt chosen. Useful. The girl from the duplex handed the keys to the castle's books. I said yes before Grant could even look up from his phone. $800 a month for the privilege of doing free accounting for people whose gate had a name on it. My mother would have read that contract twice and slid it back across the counter. I signed it with a smile, In my defense, nobody handed me anything to read. That turned out to be the whole design. Here's what you learn when a 100-year-old name hands you its checkbook. Names don't cash. I had the Voss household accounts balanced inside a month, and what they balanced to was a slow, elegant leak. The furniture store's transfers to the family had thinned every year for a decade. The club dues, the Heritage Committee galas, the landscaping service with the embroidered shirts, the wine deliveries, none of it had thinned at all. The house consumed like 1985. The income arrived like a store with two big-box competitors out by the highway. I did what I do for every client, bleeding quietly. I built a gentle little proposal, trim the landscaping to twice a month, rebid the insurance, pause one of the club memberships. Harold hadn't touched the golf course in 2 years. I presented it after Sunday dinner with the soft voice I use on proud old shop owners. Patricia listened the way a queen listens to weather she has no intention of experiencing, and then she folded her hands and delivered the house motto with a smile that ended the meeting. This family does not live like accountants, dear. Fine, but one line in those books would not leave me alone. Every month, $940 went out to something called GN Servicing, LLC. Autopay, memo line blank, going back years, no file, no folder, no explanation anywhere in the drawer of documents Patricia had surrendered to me. It wasn't insurance. It wasn't the store. When I asked Patricia, she said, "Harold handles that," in the same tone as the motto. When I asked Harold, he turned up the volume on a golf tournament and asked if I'd ever seen anything like this young man's short game. I let it go. Write that down somewhere. I let it go. At the back of the Voss property, past the garden, there's a 2-story carriage house, brick, slate roof, gorgeous bones, abandoned to boxes and mice since sometime around the moon landing. The first time I walked through it, I did what I now recognize as a dangerous thing for a hungry heart to do in a beautiful ruin. I furnished it in my head. And Patricia, who missed nothing, watched me do it. That fall, over dessert, she made the offer with Grant nodding beside her like a notary. "Fix it up, you two. That's your place. Every young Voss couple needs a nest, and heaven knows we're not using it." A 2-bedroom home on the family land, ours. The girl from the duplex actually teared up at the table, which I'm sure was noted in a ledger somewhere. But I am still my mother's daughter, so the next morning I asked, as lightly as I could, whether we might put something in writing. Nothing dramatic, just a page, a lease, a life estate, anything with ink on it. Patricia looked at me with gentle, wounded amusement, the expression you'd give a child who asked you to sign for a hug. "Family doesn't do paperwork, dear." I asked Grant privately to press. He kissed my forehead and said the 11 words I'd be hearing in my sleep for years. "It's my parents, Thea. I promise you. You can trust me." So here's what I did, and thank God for the habit. I said okay. I opened my savings, $38,000. Every dollar of it earned one small business ledger at a time, and I hired the contractor myself. And I kept every receipt, every invoice, every transfer, every canceled check, in a green folder in my office. You'll see why that matters. The renovation took most of a year, and I loved it the way you love a thing you're secretly building your whole future inside. I chose the doorknobs, real brass, warm in the hand. I stood in the gutted kitchen with the contractor, a patient bear of a man named Gil, arguing happily about where a window should go. Grant came out on weekends, swung a hammer for an hour, and got photographed doing it. I came out every day I could and got sawdust in my hair. Sunday dinners, Patricia began mentioning me almost fondly, which should have been my warning, because her fondness always arrived with a moral attached. One night, passing the potatoes, she surveyed the table and delivered it. "You know what I appreciate about Thea? She contributes. Everyone under this roof earns their keep." Heads nodded around the china like it was scripture. Harold said, "Here, here." Grant winked at me. "That's Mom for you," and speared a green bean. And I sat there feeling, God help me, proud, earning my keep. As if that sentence were a compliment and not a price tag. As if anyone had ever asked what Grant's keep cost, or Harold's, or the retrievers. That's the thing about a house with a ledger instead of a heart. The rules only have gravity for some people, and you can live there a long time before you notice which way things fall. That Christmas, the 3-generation photo in front of the fireplace happened as always. Patricia seated center, Harold's hand on her shoulder, Grant behind. I took the picture. I remember thinking, next year I'll be in it. Hold that thought. It expires in about 8 months. By late winter, the carriage house had drywall, plumbing, and my whole heart. Gil was down to trim work and paint. Grant and I stood in the empty upstairs bedroom one Saturday, the light coming through the new window I'd fought for, and he put his chin on my head and said, "Crib goes there," and pointed to the corner, and I cried a little into his coat, because 2 days earlier in the bathroom of our East Wing practically apartment, I had watched 2 pink lines appear on a test. We told the family at Sunday dinner. I will now describe Patricia Voss receiving the news of her first grandchild, because it happened in 2 distinct movements, like a short symphony. Movement 1, genuine delight. She clapped her hands once, actually glowed, said, "A Voss baby." And for 4 full seconds I saw the woman Grant swore existed under the committee chair. Movement 2, arriving before the pie was cut. Recalibration. "Now," she said, folding her napkin. "How are you planning to manage your little business? Clients can be so demanding, and you'll be needed at home. We should think about what your months look like. Not how are you feeling? Not have you told your mother? What do your months look like? Which, if you speak fluent Patricia, means, what does your cash flow look like?" I said work was flexible, that bookkeeping travels well, that I'd managed harder things than a baby. She smiled and said, "Of course, dear," and wrote nothing down, because the ledger in her head never needed paper. I didn't know it yet, but somewhere in that pause between the clap and the napkin, my file in that house had been moved from asset to liability, pending review. At 24 weeks, I started bleeding on a Tuesday morning and spent the night in a hospital bed listening to my daughter's heartbeat gallop on a monitor, which resets your entire definition of what matters. The diagnosis had a Latin name, the prescription was plain English, bed rest, modified until delivery, no commuting to clients, no lifting. Stress, the doctor said, looking at me the way doctors look when they mean it, is not optional to avoid. It's medical. Grant held my hand and said all the right things in the room. My mother drove down before dawn and said almost nothing, which from June is devotion, and left a cooler of food in my refrigerator labeled by day of the week. And my income dropped through the floor. I kept 4 clients I could serve from a laptop in bed. I lost 9. The first of the month came. For the first time in 3 years, I could put $500 into the household envelope instead of $800. I wrote a note explaining, promised to catch up, and slid it under Patricia's ledger like a schoolgirl leaving an apology on a teacher's desk. Nothing was said. That's the part people don't understand about houses like that. Nothing is ever said. Instead, 2 mornings later, the ledger appeared on my breakfast tray, open to the contributions page, my initials at the top of a column, and next to the current month, in Patricia's fountain pen hand, a small, neat, red circle. That was all. A red circle, delivered with toast. Grant said, "I'll cover it. Don't stress. Remember what the doctor said." And then his next paycheck from the family store came up short, because, he said, rubbing his neck, "The store's a little tight right now." The store. Tight. File that next to GN servicing, $940 a month, memo line blank. Here's how a house disappears you, by degrees, politely, at dinner. 3rd trimester, I was allowed downstairs for meals, and I sat at that cherry wood table like a chair that talked. Conversation flowed around me, the committee, the club, the neighbors' addition. If I mentioned the nursery, subject changed within 2 sentences. Patricia developed a repertoire of stories that all had the same moral, delivered to the table at large while looking at no one, which meant me. When I was carrying Grant, she'd say, ladling soup. I hosted 40 people for Harold's parents' anniversary. On my feet all evening. Women of this family have never been delicate. Harold would nod at his soup. And Grant. I want to be precise about Grant because he's not a villain. He's something that costs you more slowly. Grant got quiet. Not cold. Quiet. He'd squeeze my knee under the table. A private telegram. Sorry, you know how she is. And say nothing above the tablecloth. And I learned that a squeeze under a table is what surrender feels like when it still loves you. So I did what my mother's daughter does when the world goes soft underfoot. I kept books. My own now. A plain notebook in my nightstand. Every household payment I'd ever made, dated. Every carriage house invoice, cross-reference to the green folder in my office. $38,000 in renovations. $33,000 in household contributions over 3 years. I wasn't planning anything. I want that understood. There was no strategy. Only a bookkeeper laying sandbags out of habit. 1 page at a time, the way some women pray. Then one night, passing the study door on my slow lap of the hallway, I heard Patricia on the phone, her voice low and vicious in a way the committee never got to hear. I understand the situation, but this household cannot carry a mouth that doesn't work. I stood in that hallway with my hand on my belly and made myself believe she was talking about the store. An employee, a vendor, anyone. You'd have done it too. At 8 months pregnant on doctor-ordered calm, you ration what you're able to know. But I'll tell you who has never once lied to me. Paperwork. And if you've ever watched a promise die by paperwork, a name left off a deed, we'll write it down later that never found a pen. Put it in the comments. Because this next part will feel like your own memory. The carriage house was finished. Finished. Gil had walked me through on video call, brass knobs warm in the afternoon light, my window exactly where I'd fought for it. I proposed the obvious. We'd move in before the baby came. Get settled. Set up the crib. 10 steps from the main house but a door of our own. And the stalling began. So smooth it took me 2 weeks to recognize it as stalling. After the final inspection, dear. There was no inspection. I'd hired the contractor. The insurance needs sorting first. I offered to sort it. I was reminded rest was medical. After the baby comes, we'll see about everything. We'll see. Then one afternoon, I watched from the east wing window as 2 men in polo shirts carried folding tables, gala banners, and 40 boxes of Heritage Committee archives across the garden and into my carriage house, my kitchen, my brass, my window, and stacked them where the crib was supposed to go. Patricia directed traffic with one finger, pointing which of my rooms would hold which of her boxes. When I asked at dinner, she didn't even reload. Storage, temporarily. It's not as if anyone's living there. And then she took the key. I want to slow down here, because of everything that happened in that house. This is the moment my body still remembers first. I kept the carriage house key on my everyday ring, a heavy brass thing, old-fashioned, warm in the pocket like the doorknobs I'd chosen to match it. Gil had handed it to me at the walk-through with a little ceremony. Key to the castle, boss. Because he knew whose sweat and savings were in those walls. It lived between my office key and my car key, and some evenings, I'm not ashamed to say, I'd hold it in my coat pocket like a worry stone. It was the one object in the world that said, promised. A week after the boxes went in, Patricia stopped me in the front hall, hand already out, palm up. The painters need access, dear, and we can't be hunting you down in your condition. Let me hold the carriage house key. I'll return it when everything's settled. Reader, the painting was done. I had paid the painter. I looked at her open palm and I heard my mother's voice. If they won't let you read it, that's your answer. And I heard the doctor's voice. Stress is medical, and I was 36 weeks pregnant, standing in a hallway that had gotten very quiet. I worked the brass key off the ring and set it in her hand. She closed her fingers and smiled. There. Isn't that simpler? She never returned it. I asked once, 2 weeks later, carefully casual. You're about to give birth, she said, not unkindly, which made it worse. What could you possibly need a key for? Every morning after that, I looked at the gap on my keyring. Remember the gap? We're coming back for it. Nora came in June, 2 days after my due date, 7 pounds even, with a cry like a fire alarm and my mother's stubborn chin. Labor was 14 hours, and for the record, the person in the room was June, in the good dress she wears to things that matter, reading a paperback between contractions like a woman guarding a border, which is exactly what she was doing. Grant arrived at hour 11, apologizing, hair wild, an emergency meeting about the store. He said. The bank. Refinancing. He'd explain later. And even through the fog, I remember thinking, there's that word again. The plumbing word. Refinancing. But then Nora was here, and the world narrowed to 7 pounds of it, and I forgave everything on general principle. They put her on my chest, and I understood, in 1 second flat, every unreasonable thing my mother had ever done. Patricia visited that evening. 10 minutes, by the clock on the wall. She wore the good pearls, looked into the bassinet at her first grandchild, and said, "This is verbatim. I have replayed it enough to certify the transcript. A girl." Just that, in the tone you'd use finding out the restaurant had run out of the fish. Then she straightened the flowers June had brought, told me the house would be busy this weekend with the committee's summer event, and left a gift bag containing a silver frame, empty, for the christening portrait. An empty frame. Sit with the empty frame. It's the most honest thing she ever gave me. That night, June folded herself into the vinyl recliner, and in the dark, apropos of nothing, she said, "When they discharge you, you'll go back to that house. If anything happens, anything, you call me before you argue with anyone. Promise me that." I laughed. She didn't. "Promise me, Thea." I promised. I didn't ask why. She'd have told me, and I wasn't ready, and I think she knew both things. They kept us overnight. One night, routine, me learning to nurse at 3 a.m. in that particular hospital silence that feels like the inside of a held breath. Grant visited once, for an hour, distracted, taking calls in the hallway. Through the door, I caught fragments in his low store manager voice. Numbers, dates. We just need until fall. Tell them we're good for it. When he came back in, I asked, flat out, no wifely diplomacy, "Grant, is something wrong with money?" And my husband looked at me, at his wife, in a hospital gown, holding his day-old daughter, and performed his mother's smile. "Nothing you need to worry about. You just rest." I want to flag that sentence for every woman listening. Nothing you need to worry about is not reassurance. It's a door closing, softly, with you on the outside of your own life. I didn't push. I had a jaundiced newborn in stitches. You ration what you're able to know. Discharge came on a bright Thursday morning. Grant was supposed to drive us home at 10. At 9:40 he texted, "Store crisis? Can't leave? So sorry. Take a cab. I'll see you at home, and we'll celebrate." My mother was at work. I told her not to leave early. We were fine. It's a 10-minute cab. I strapped my daughter's carrier into a taxi that smelled like pine trees, and I actually said to the driver, "God forgive me. Beaumont Avenue, the big one with the stone gate." Proud of it. 3 years of tuition into that family, and I still flashed the name like a keycard. The cab pulled away and left us on the curb, and I stood there a second, adjusting the carrier, looking up at the house. All the windows were closed. On the porch, in the shade, sat 2 suitcases. You know a suitcase's silhouette the way you know your own handwriting. Those were mine. The navy set. Wedding gift from a cousin. Top of the nearest one. My winter coat. Folded in a neat square, in June. Somebody had packed for a season I wouldn't be there for. I stood on the walk doing the thing where your brain offers you better explanations at a discount. We're being moved to the carriage house. The suitcases are the first load. I carried my daughter up the steps of that porch on legs I couldn't feel. And I tried my key in the big oak door, and it went in half a knuckle and stopped. New lock. The brass plate still bright from the locksmith's screwdriver. I rang the bell of the house I had lived in for 3 years, holding a baby born into its name the day before, standing next to my own packed luggage. Footsteps. The door opened 4 inches and stopped on the chain. The chain, for me. And in the gap, Patricia, pearls on at 10 in the morning, face arranged like a form letter. Thea. Not dear. My name, served cold. Behind her, deeper in the hall, I heard a floorboard and then nothing, a presence choosing to stay a presence. I said something brilliant like, Patricia, my key. And she looked at me through that 4-inch gap the way you look at a solicitor with a clipboard, and said the sentences she had clearly drafted, redrafted, and approved in committee. Grant needs a clean start, and this household needs contributors. You've been a lovely guest, but guests don't stay forever. A guest. 3 years, $67,000, and 1 grandchild, and I had made guest. I said, because the human brain is loyal to its last working map. Patricia, I live here. We'll sort this out when Grant gets home. He's at the store. And Patricia Voss tilted her head and gave me one small, patient, curatorial smile through the gap in her own front door and retired my map of the world in one move. Who do you think packed the suitcases, dear? Dear was back for that one. Had to be. And then, while I stood there relearning gravity, she delivered the line the whole town would eventually hear about, in the calm, budget committee voice of a woman reading a line item she'd already decided to cut. Every person under this roof earns their place. You had a difficult year and we're all sympathetic, but sympathy is not a line of credit. There is no room in this house for a useless wife. The door closed. Not slammed, closed with a click, which is worse. Slamming is at least a conversation. I stood on the porch of the finest house in Cedar Glen holding a day-old baby, next to a winter coat folded for a winter I'd apparently be spending elsewhere. And above me, I heard it. The soft complaint of an old window frame. 2nd floor, east wing, our bedroom. I stepped back off the porch into the sun and looked up. And there was Grant. My husband, Nora's father, store crisis and all. Standing behind the glass with his arms crossed, close enough to have heard everything through a window he did not open. We looked at each other for 3 full seconds. Then he looked away first. And did nothing, in the house his grandfather built, while his wife and daughter stood on the sidewalk with the luggage. So I kept my promise. I didn't knock again. I didn't argue with anyone. I sat down on the bigger suitcase, got out my phone, and called my mother. Mom, it happened. The thing you made me promise about. 4 seconds of silence on the line, and then my mother's voice, so level it scared me more than shouting would have. Are you and the baby safe? Are you sitting down? 20 minutes. Click. No questions about what or why or how could they, as if she'd been waiting by the phone for 3 years with her coat on. I sat on that suitcase in the June sun and held my sleeping daughter and did inventory, because inventory is what I have, instead of screaming. Curtains twitched across the street. The Hendersons, then the corner house. Cedar Glen was taking notes. One day, postpartum, I was sweating through a going-home outfit I'd packed weeks ago in a different life. My stitches ached when I shifted, and a purple-gray thought kept surfacing with remarkable calm, the way true things do. I paid to stand on this sidewalk. $29,000 into the envelope, 38 into the brick building I could see the slate roof of, just past the garden, full of another woman's gala banners. I had bought and paid for my own eviction and tipped on the way out. And here's the strange mercy of hitting the exact bottom of something. The shame, which had been idling in me for 3 years, quietly changed its address. It stopped being mine. It walked up those porch steps and moved in with the people behind the chain lock. I was still doing that math when the gray sedan came around the corner, my mother's sensible paid-off Camry, driving 5 miles an hour faster than my mother has ever driven, and pulled to the curb in front of me. Both front doors opened. Out of the driver's side came June Afton in her work blazer. And out of the passenger side, carrying a leather briefcase, came a silver-haired man I'd never seen before in my life. "Baby first," my mother said, and held Nora for 10 full seconds with her eyes closed, like drinking water after a long shift. Then she handed my daughter back, nodded at the silver-haired man, and said, "Thea, this is Dale Pruitt. He's been my attorney for 11 years. Get in the car, both of you. I don't do business on other people's sidewalks." We didn't drive far. Around the corner, under the big elm on Concord Street, engine off. And there, in a parked Camry with my newborn asleep in my arms, my mother opened the folder she'd been carrying, laid the first page on the center console, and turned my understanding of Cedar Glen upside down like an hourglass. The letterhead said, "Groundwork Notes, LLC." I heard my own voice say, "GN Servicing. $940 a month, memo line blank, autopay, years of it." My mother looked at me sideways, almost apologetic. "Servicing company collects it, but the note behind it, the note is mine." Reader, I do this for a living, so I didn't need the lawyer's translation, but I'll give you mine. The Voss house, the stone gate, the oak door, the chain lock, all of it. Carried a private mortgage, not from a bank. Banks had said no, years ago. From a private lender, through a broker, and private notes get bought and sold like used pianos. And 4 years ago, the note secured by the finest address in Cedar Glen had been quietly purchased by a one-woman LLC registered to half a duplex on Garnet Street. "Mom," I said. "You hold their house?" June corrected me the way she'd correct a rookie at the escrow desk. "I hold the debt sitting on their house. Different thing." A beat. Most days. Dale from the back seat, dry as an audit. As of 90 days ago, Mrs. Voss's family is $11,300 behind, which makes today less different than usual. Let me give you my mother's story the way she gave it to me, parked under that elm, in the unhurried voice of a woman who has waited 4 years to be asked. 30 years at the escrow desk means 30 years of watching this town's paper. She'd seen the Voss file cross her counter more than once, a refinance in the 90s, another after the big box stores opened by the highway, each one a little more creative than the last. "Names age like roofs, honey," she said. "From the street you can't tell, from the paperwork you can." 4 years ago, the spring I got engaged to that address, a broker's flyer crossed her desk. Private note for sale, performing, well secured, local. She recognized the address before she finished the first line, and June Afton, who has never bought a lottery ticket in her life, cashed out a retirement CD and bought the mortgage on the Voss family home. I asked the obvious, why? She was quiet a second, hands at 10 and 2 on a parked steering wheel. Because my daughter was going to be living under that roof, and I'd read what was holding the roof up. You buy the field between your house and a wildfire, Thea. That's all this ever was. She never told me because, and here she looked at me with the only apology her face makes, if you'd known, you couldn't have lived there honest. And if they knew, you'd have paid for it in 100 small ways. So the LLC stayed quiet, and when they ran 90 days behind last spring, I told the servicer to be patient. A pause. 10 and 2. I was patient because my daughter and my grandchild slept in that house. This morning, your mother-in-law solved that problem for me. She turned the key. Buckle up. We're going home to feed the baby. Then you're going to tell me what you want. That night at my mother's duplex, my old room, a crib assembled by Dale Pruitt of all people, in dress shirt and reading glasses, I nursed Nora at 2 a.m. and stared at the folder on the dresser. And I'm going to be honest with you about the tide that came through me, because this channel doesn't sell saints. I thought about foreclosure. I let myself walk all the way through it. The notice in the paper, the committee reading it, an auction sign zip-tied to the stone gate, Patricia carrying her own suitcases down those porch steps while the Hendersons' curtains twitched. I tasted it. It tasted the way sugar tastes when you're sick. Bright, then wrong. Because at the end of that daydream, every time, was Nora, 5 years old, asking why the other grandma lived nowhere, and me handing her a war for an inheritance. So I did what I do. I took the pencil off my mother's nightstand, She keeps one there, of course she does. And in the back of the baby's feeding log I wrote 3 lines, like a bookkeeper closing a hard year. Option 1. Burn it down. Option 2. Use the note to force the door back open. Make them take me in, the wife, with the leverage. Option 3. Collect what is mine, to the dollar, and close the account. I looked at option 2 the longest. I'll admit it. The old hunger has a long tail. Living in that castle, knowing they had to be polite to me. And then I heard it in Patricia's voice. Earns her keep. With a lean for a leash, and realized option 2 was just the same house with the collar on the other neck. My phone lit up. Grant. Mom went too far today. Give it a few weeks to cool down and I'll bring you home. We'll talk. A few weeks. From the man watching from a window. I put the phone face down and I drew a circle around option 3. In the morning, my mother made eggs, set 2 plates, sat across from me the way she used to before school, and asked her question with the salt still in her hand. I can call that loan tomorrow, Thea. Accelerate, foreclose, the whole parade. Dale says we'd win ugly, but win. Or I can shred the file and sell the note back to some pension fund and we let gravity handle the Voss family, because gravity always does. It's not my sidewalk they stood you on. She set the salt down. So it's not my call. What do you want? And I heard the question underneath, the one she'd been asking my whole life in snow tires and labeled coolers. Who do you want to be about this? I looked at Nora in the bassinet, 2 days old, running a fever of exactly nothing, owing nothing, signed up for nothing. And I answered as the thing I am, which turns out not to be a Voss or a victim, but a bookkeeper. I want to close the account. Correct, to the dollar, and done. Here's what that meant, drawn up at the kitchen table by Dale over the second pot of coffee. 1. The acceleration notice gets delivered. Real, legal, loaded. Because the Vosses do not answer doors unless the knock is heavier than they are. 2. My civil claim rides with it. $38,000 in unjust enrichment for the carriage house, documented in a green folder they didn't know existed, plus my belongings, intact, and an uncontested, quiet separation. 3. The trade. If they make me whole and behave, June restructures the arrears and sells the note to a boring institutional servicer. Nobody loses a house over my broken heart. If they fight, option 1 comes off the shelf all by itself. Dale looked at my 1-page terms, then at me, over the reading glasses. In 30 years of practice, he said, the reasonable ones are always the scariest. Dale worked fast. By Monday, he'd reached the Voss's longtime attorney, a courtly old firm downtown that had handled Voss matters for 2 generations and, Dale noted with cocktail party dryness, had not been fully paid for the last one. The attorney's first response was the town's favorite lullaby. Surely this is a misunderstanding. The family's standing. A private matter, best kept private. Dale let him finish, then read him 2 numbers. The arrears, and the recorded instrument number of the mortgage. The line went quiet the way a room goes quiet when the auditor takes off his coat. A meeting was proposed for Thursday at the firm's office. Neutral ground, dignified. And this is the one thing in the whole campaign I overruled. No, I said. The porch. Everyone looked at me. My mother, Dale, even Nora had opinions. I'd thought it through the night before, feeding her at 3 a.m., which is when I do my clearest thinking now. For 3 years, every hard conversation in that family had happened on their terrain, at their table, under their portraits, with me in the guest chair. The one time the terms were truly theirs, they'd chosen a chain-locked door and a sidewalk, in public, where the whole street could watch me learn what I was worth to them. The papers concern the house, I said. The papers can visit the house. 10 a.m. Thursday. We use the front door. Dale allowed himself 1 millimeter of smile and made the call. Thursday morning, I dressed in the blazer I wear to client audits. Not new, not borrowed, mine, bought with bookkeeping money. And left Nora with Mrs. Okafor next door, who raised 4 babies and treats guarding one as a paid vacation. In the car, my mother handed me the folder and said one thing. You knock. We drove through Cedar Glen slow. The stone gate came up on the right like a headline. 10 a.m. Thursday. 3 of us on the porch where my suitcases had sat. Me in my audit blazer, my mother in her work one, Dale with the briefcase. I knocked. Me, per instructions. 3 even raps on 100-year-old oak. Footsteps, the chain, sliding off. And Patricia Voss opened her front door in full regalia, pearls and posture, with the expression preloaded. The form letter, the guest doesn't stay. And she got as far as, Thea, this is not... before Dale stepped forward with the mild bearing of a man delivering a casserole and held out a business card and a single white envelope. Dale Pruitt, ma'am, Counsel for Groundwork Notes, LLC, holder of the note and mortgage recorded against this property. You'll want to read this before you finish that sentence. I watched her hands take the envelope on committee autopilot. I watched her read, Notice of Default and Acceleration. And I want to describe precisely what happened to Patricia Voss's posture, because I had 3 years of her posture and this was new. It broke from the top down in stations, the eyebrows first, then the set of the mouth, then the shoulders, then the hand that went out and found the doorframe of the house her name was mortared into, and held it, the way you'd hold a railing on ice. This is... she started, and her voice came out without any committee in it at all. What is this? Harold pays a... There's a servicing company. This is some trick. My mother, who had said nothing yet, spoke exactly one sentence, in the tone of 30 years of escrow desks. The servicer collects it, Patricia. I own it. Shall we do this in the doorway, or at your table? I've heard so much about it. And for the first time since the invention of the Voss family, the door on Beaumont Avenue opened all the way for an Afton. We sat at the cherrywood table, and I noted, from a great inner distance, that for the first time in 3 years I was seated at its middle, not its edge. Harold was summoned from the den and arrived already gray, which told me the words default and acceleration were not new to him, only the name behind them was. Dale laid the papers out in a clean row like surgical tools. The note, endorsed and assigned, the recorded mortgage, the payment history, those $940 auto payments, memo line blank, marching backward for years, and the arrears summary. $11,300, 90 days, itemized. Nobody touched the pages. Patricia stared at the assignment. The line where the note passed to Groundwork Notes, LLC, 4 years ago. And you could watch her doing archaeology, digging back through every Sunday dinner, every red circle in her ledger, every dear, recalculating who exactly had been sitting in the guest chair. Grant, she called, and her voice cracked on the vowel. Come down here. And my husband came down the same stairs he'd watched me from, took in the table. His wife, her mother, a lawyer, the family paper laid out like an autopsy, and stopped on the bottom step with the expression of a man arriving at the exact intersection he'd spent 5 years steering around. Patricia rallied once. Give her that. She pulled the committee voice back on like a coat and aimed it at my mother. This house has stood for 100 years. This family built half this town. If you think a bookkeeper's mother with some LLC is going to frighten. My mother let her finish. June Afton has never once interrupted anyone. She says the ends of sentences are where people confess. Then she folded her hands on the good table and put it down like a foundation stone. We don't buy names, Patricia. We buy ground. And the ground under your name has been in my handbag for 4 years. What happened next I didn't expect, and I want to render it honestly, because it's the only moment in this story where I saw the whole machine instead of just its teeth. Patricia sat down, not the committee dissent. She dropped the last 2 inches, and the pearls swung, and for a moment she was just a 63-year-old woman at a table she'd spent a life defending. You think I was born at the head of this table? She said, to no one, to the portraits maybe. I came into this family with 1 suitcase. I ate at the children's table for 10 years, 10 Christmases, before Harold's mother let me so much as hold a serving spoon. Everyone who enters this house pays. That is how a name survives. I paid, and I paid, and then she heard it. She heard her own accounting said out loud in front of a bookkeeper, and the sentence died in the middle, and her eyes came up and found mine, and for 2 full seconds, the only honest ones we ever shared, we understood each other perfectly. She had been me. She'd just decided the fee was legitimate because she'd paid it. I didn't gloat. There was nothing to win from her anymore. I opened my folder and slid 1 page across. My terms? 1 paragraph. Bookkeeper's prose. 38,000 documented for the carriage house. Receipts attached. My belongings. Intact. By Saturday. A quiet, uncontested separation. In exchange, the arrears get restructured and the note goes to an institutional servicer who will never know your name from any other account number. Nobody loses this house because of me. That's the whole invoice. It doesn't compound. Then I stood, walked out to the porch, and did the thing I'd carried in my pocket all morning. I set the brass carriage house key on the white porch railing where the suitcases had been. I'm returning the only thing of yours I ever wanted, I said. Behind me, from the doorway. Thea. Grant. I turned and looked at my husband for what felt like the closing of a long ledger. You know where my mother's door is, I said. You've never once used it. I walked down those porch steps. The same 6 steps, the same June light, the same sidewalk where a chain lock had taught me my market value. Except this time I was the one leaving, on my legs, at my pace, with my mother and my lawyer falling in beside me like a small parade of exactly the right size. The Hendersons' curtain twitched. Let it. Take notes, Cedar Glen. Nobody spoke until the car doors shut. Then my mother started the engine, looked both ways like a woman who has never once rolled a stop sign and said, "You gave the key back." I did. Good, she said, and that was the entire debrief, and it was enough, because we both knew what I'd really left on that railing. Not brass. The whole idea. The one I'd been carrying since the lit windows of my childhood, that somewhere behind a stone gate there was a table with my name on it if I could just contribute enough to deserve it. I'd finally read that contract all the way through. I declined to renew. Grief has good manners. It waited until we were home. That evening at the duplex I fed Nora, handed her to her grandmother, went into my old bedroom, closed the door, and came apart quietly for a while. Not for Patricia, God knows, and not even mostly for Grant. For the family in the window. The carved roast, the 3-generation photograph, the whole beautiful stage set I'd paid $67,000 in tuition to stand inside of. That dream had been mine since I was 8. I buried it at 31, in a duplex bedroom with band posters still on the closet door. My phone rang at 9. Grant. I let it go to voicemail. He was 10 minutes away. He did not drive over. His silence, one last time, filed itself. The voicemail, for the record, was Grant at his most Grant. Thea. That was... Look, Mom's shaken. Everybody's shaken. I never wanted any of this. Just give it a few weeks, okay? We'll figure it out. I love you. A few weeks. His whole vocabulary of love was a request for extensions, and I'd stopped doing his family's books. I sat at my mother's kitchen table under the same light where I'd learned long division, and I filled out the divorce paperwork Dale had left in a plain folder. And I want to be honest about what that cost, because the internet is full of stories where walking away is a fist pump and confetti. It isn't. My hand shook on the first signature line. Not from doubt. From downgrade. You spend 5 years calling something your future, and then one Tuesday, it's an account you're closing, and your body knows the difference even when your mind has done the math twice. I signed. I dated it. My handwriting steady by the last page, which is its own small biography. Then I did the final entry in the notebook from my nightstand, the one where I'd sandbagged 3 years of payments and invoices, and I ruled a line under all of it the way my first accounting teacher taught me. Double line, account closed, nothing carried forward. Nora woke up hungry at 2, right on schedule. I fed my daughter in the dark of my childhood bedroom, her hand around my finger, and I told her the first true thing I ever taught her. You will never have to earn a seat at any table of mine. Here's how the accounts settled. The Vosses paid, not graciously, but paid, $38,000 inside 6 months, raised the old money way, which is to say the boat went first and then Harold's antique roadster, the one from the parade. My boxes arrived intact by that first Saturday, packed, I noticed, with genuine care, Patricia's hand, unmistakably. Say what you want, the woman can pack. The separation went uncontested. Sole residential custody to me. Grant gets his Saturdays with Nora, at the park or at my mother's kitchen table, where he is served coffee and watched like a teller's drawer. He's gentle with her. He was always gentle. Gentle was never the missing ingredient. And my mother kept her end to the letter. The arrears were restructured, and the note, the famous note, was sold, at a modest and unromantic profit, to a pension fund's servicing arm in Ohio, where the Voss name is now 7 digits in a portfolio, right between a ranch house in Toledo and a duplex in Akron, which is the most democratic thing that has ever happened to that family. I bought it as a firewall, June said, signing the transfer papers. Never wanted a throne. Thrones need dusting. But gravity, as my mother says, always does the bookkeeping eventually. The following spring, a tasteful sign appeared outside the stone gate on Beaumont Avenue. The finest house in Cedar Glen sold in August, to a perfectly nice orthodontist family with a trampoline, God bless them. And the Vosses moved to a townhouse near the club, where the Heritage Committee meets in Patricia's front room now, the archives in a rented storage unit. Nobody foreclosed. Nobody had to. A borrowed name came due all on its own. I just declined to keep making the payments for it. The town gasped for one season and then, being a town, moved on to newer weather. As for me, Afton Bookkeeping reopened that fall. Same one-room office, new sign painted by a client's daughter. My 9 lost clients came back and brought friends. Small towns keep score fairly in the long run, whatever their committees say. And a strange little side practice grew up on its own. Referral by whisper. Young women, engaged or newly married, coming in with paperwork their new families had slid across various beautiful tables. A prenup, a family investment opportunity. One girl with a household ledger that made my hands cold. I read every document with them, line by line, the way my mother read mine too late, and her own always. I never charge for those appointments. Call it a tithe to the escrow desk. Nora turned 1 in June. For her birthday, my mother pulled out her phone and made us take a picture on the duplex porch. June in her work blazer, me holding the baby, all 3 of us squinting into the afternoon sun, slightly off-center because Mrs. Okafor's thumb was near the lens. It is, objectively, a bad photograph. It is also the only 3-generation portrait I have ever been in, and it hangs in my office where the Voss Christmas photo used to hang in my imagination, and I have looked at it every working day for a year and never once seen a fireplace missing from it. My key ring, in case you're wondering, carries exactly 2 keys now, the office and a small rented house on Garnet Street, 4 doors down from my mother, with a porch just big enough for 2 chairs and a bassinet. Nobody holds a key to my life for the painters anymore. The gap on the ring is gone. It took me 31 years to learn what my mother tried to hand me at 12 over meatloaf, so let me hand it to you now, free, no ledger. A family that makes you pay your way in was never selling family. It was selling a seat, and the rent on that seat never stops rising. The people who are actually yours pull the chair out for free at 3 in the morning with no ledger anywhere in the house, because love that keeps books isn't love, it's a mortgage, and someone, someday, always calls the note. That's my story. 2 suitcases on a sidewalk, 1 gray sedan, and a brass key I finally gave back. If you've been paying rent on a seat at somebody's table, hear me. The price never stops rising, and the person who shows up in 20 minutes is your family. Share this with someone who needs it. Tell me in the comments what you'd have done on that porch, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. I came into this family with one suitcase. I ate at the children's table for 10 years, 10 Christmases, before Harold's mother let me so much as hold a serving spoon. Everyone who enters this house pays. That is how a name survives. I paid, and I paid, and then she heard it. She heard her own accounting said out loud in front of a bookkeeper, and the sentence died in the middle, and her eyes came up and found mine, and for 2 full seconds, the only honest ones we ever shared, we understood each other perfectly. She had been me. She'd just decided the fee was legitimate because she'd paid it. I didn't gloat. There was nothing to win from her anymore. I opened my folder and slid 1 page across. My terms? 1 paragraph. Bookkeeper's prose. 38,000 documented for the carriage house. Receipts attached. My belongings. Intact. By Saturday. A quiet, uncontested separation. In exchange, the arrears get restructured and the note goes to an institutional servicer who will never know your name from any other account number. Nobody loses this house because of me. That's the whole invoice. It doesn't compound. Then I stood, walked out to the porch, and did the thing I'd carried in my pocket all morning. I set the brass carriage house key on the white porch railing where the suitcases had been. I'm returning the only thing of yours I ever wanted, I said. Behind me, from the doorway. Thea. Grant. I turned and looked at my husband for what felt like the closing of a long ledger. You know where my mother's door is, I said. You've never once used it. I walked down those porch steps. The same 6 steps, the same June light, the same sidewalk where a chain lock had taught me my market value. Except this time I was the one leaving, on my legs, at my pace, with my mother and my lawyer falling in beside me like a small parade of exactly the right size. The Hendersons' curtain twitched. Let it. Take notes, Cedar Glen. Nobody spoke until the car doors shut. Then my mother started the engine, looked both ways like a woman who has never once rolled a stop sign and said, "You gave the key back." I did. Good, she said. And that was the entire debrief, and it was enough, because we both knew what I'd really left on that railing. Not brass. The whole idea. The one I'd been carrying since the lit windows of my childhood, that somewhere behind a stone gate there was a table with my name on it if I could just contribute enough to deserve it. I'd finally read that contract all the way through. I declined to renew. Grief has good manners. It waited until we were home. That evening at the duplex I fed Nora, handed her to her grandmother, went into my old bedroom, closed the door, and came apart quietly for a while. Not for Patricia, God knows, and not even mostly for Grant. For the family in the window. The carved roast, the 3-generation photograph, the whole beautiful stage set I'd paid $67,000 in tuition to stand inside of. That dream had been mine since I was 8. I buried it at 31, in a duplex bedroom with band posters still on the closet door. My phone rang at 9. Grant. I let it go to voicemail. He was 10 minutes away. He did not drive over. His silence, one last time, filed itself. The voicemail, for the record, was Grant at his most Grant. Thea. That was... Look, Mom's shaken. Everybody's shaken. I never wanted any of this. Just give it a few weeks, okay? We'll figure it out. I love you. A few weeks. His whole vocabulary of love was a request for extensions, and I'd stopped doing his family's books. I sat at my mother's kitchen table under the same light where I'd learned long division, and I filled out the divorce paperwork Dale had left in a plain folder. And I want to be honest about what that cost, because the internet is full of stories where walking away is a fist pump and confetti. It isn't. My hand shook on the first signature line. Not from doubt. From downgrade. You spend 5 years calling something your future, and then one Tuesday, it's an account you're closing, and your body knows the difference even when your mind has done the math twice. I signed. I dated it. My handwriting steady by the last page, which is its own small biography. Then I did the final entry in the notebook from my nightstand, the one where I'd sandbagged 3 years of payments and invoices, and I ruled a line under all of it the way my first accounting teacher taught me. Double line, Account closed, nothing carried forward. Nora woke up hungry at 2, right on schedule. I fed my daughter in the dark of my childhood bedroom, her hand around my finger, and I told her the first true thing I ever taught her. You will never have to earn a seat at any table of mine. Here's how the account settled. The Vosses paid, not graciously, but paid, $38,000 inside 6 months, raised the old money way, which is to say the boat went first and then Harold's antique roadster, the one from the parade. My boxes arrived intact by that first Saturday, packed, I noticed, with genuine care, Patricia's hand, unmistakably. Say what you want, the woman can pack. The separation went uncontested. Sole residential custody to me. Grant gets his Saturdays with Nora, at the park or at my mother's kitchen table, where he is served coffee and watched like a teller's drawer. He's gentle with her. He was always gentle. Gentle was never the missing ingredient. And my mother kept her end to the letter. The arrears were restructured, and the note, the famous note, was sold, at a modest and unromantic profit, to a pension fund's servicing arm in Ohio, where the Voss name is now 7 digits in a portfolio, right between a ranch house in Toledo and a duplex in Akron, which is the most democratic thing that has ever happened to that family. I bought it as a firewall, June said, signing the transfer papers. Never wanted a throne. Thrones need dusting. But gravity, as my mother says, always does the bookkeeping eventually. The following spring, a tasteful sign appeared outside the stone gate on Beaumont Avenue. The finest house in Cedar Glen sold in August, to a perfectly nice orthodontist family with a trampoline, God bless them. And the Vosses moved to a townhouse near the club, where the Heritage Committee meets in Patricia's front room now, the archives in a rented storage unit. Nobody foreclosed. Nobody had to. A borrowed name came due all on its own. I just declined to keep making the payments for it. The town gasped for 1 season and then, being a town, moved on to newer weather. As for me, Afton Bookkeeping reopened that fall. Same one-room office, new sign painted by a client's daughter. My 9 lost clients came back and brought friends. Small towns keep score fairly in the